The laughter at Aunt Patricia's dining table felt like knives cutting through my heart. 23 family members crowded around the long mahogany table, their voices mixing with the clinking of silverware and the smell of roasted turkey. I sat quietly in my navy blue jilbab and matching khimar, picking at the mashed potatoes on my plate. The conversation flowed around me like water around a stone. "So Amelia?" my cousin Madison called out suddenly, her voice cutting through the chatter. "When are you going to ditch that Halloween costume and join the real world again?" Her bright red lipstick curved into a smirk as she gestured toward my modest clothing. The table fell silent. Uncle Thomas choked on his wine. Aunt Sandra's fork froze halfway to her mouth. Madison's perfectly styled blonde hair caught the chandelier light as she leaned back in her chair, clearly enjoying the attention. Her low-cut black dress sparkled with sequins. "I mean, seriously, we're not in the Middle Ages anymore," she continued, her voice dripping with false concern. "You're 25, not 95. The silence stretched like a rubber band about to snap. I felt every pair of eyes on me, waiting for my reaction. Some faces showed embarrassment, others curiosity, and a few displayed barely hidden agreement with Madison's cruel words. My heart pounded against my ribs, but I kept my expression calm. I didn't argue, I didn't defend myself, I didn't even look at Madison. Instead, I quietly folded my napkin and placed it beside my untouched plate. The scraping of my chair against the hardwood floor seemed deafeningly loud in the continued silence. I stood up slowly, my movements deliberate and graceful. "Excuse me," I said softly, my voice steady despite the storm raging inside my chest. I reached for my purse hanging on the back of my chair, but my hand brushed against my small leather-bound Qur'an sitting on the table beside my water glass. In that moment, something inside me whispered to leave it behind. Madison's laughter followed me as I walked toward the front door. "Oh, come on, Amelia, can't you take a joke?" she called out, but her voice carried a nervous edge now. The forced lightness didn't hide the awkwardness that had settled over the room like a heavy blanket. I paused at the doorway, not turning around. The weight of their stares pressed against my back. Without a word, I stepped into the cool evening air and closed the door behind me. The autumn breeze lifted the edges of my khimar as I walked to my car, my small Qur'an still sitting on Aunt Patricia's dining table like a silent witness to what had just happened. 20 minutes later, Madison's curiosity got the better of her. The family had resumed their dinner conversation, but the atmosphere remained strained. Uncle Thomas made awkward jokes about the weather, while Aunt Sandra nervously refilled everyone's wine glasses. Madison kept glancing at the small brown book I'd left behind, its gold Arabic lettering catching the light. "What even is this thing?" Madison muttered, reaching for my Qur'an. She picked it up with the same casual disregard she'd show a magazine, flipping through its pages with perfectly manicured nails. The thin paper rustled as she turned each page, her expression shifting from mockery to confusion as she encountered the Arabic text. Halfway through the book, a folded piece of paper fell out onto her lap. Madison unfolded it with raised eyebrows, expecting maybe a bookmark or grocery list. Instead, she found my handwriting covering both sides of the paper in blue ink. Her eyes scanned the first few lines, and her smirk slowly faded. The letter was a dua I'd written 6 months ago during a particularly difficult time. It was my prayer to Allah, asking for strength to remain patient when people mocked my faith. The words spoke of loneliness, of choosing modesty in a world that called it oppression, and of finding peace in submission to God despite the ridicule from those I loved most. Madison's hands trembled slightly as she read my handwritten prayer. "Ya Allah," the letter began, "grant me patience when my own family questions the choice you guided me to make. Help me remain kind when they mock what brings me closest to you. Let my silence be stronger than their words, and let my peace shine brighter than their judgment." The words hit Madison like cold water. She glanced around the table, but everyone was engaged in forced conversations, trying to pretend the earlier incident hadn't happened. She continued reading, her throat tightening with each line. "I know they don't understand why I chose this path," the prayer continued. "They see my hijab as a cage, but you know it's my crown. They think I've lost myself, but I've never been more found. When Madison laughs at my clothes, help me remember she's hurting too. When Uncle Brian rolls his eyes during my prayers, remind me that you see everything." Madison's name in my prayer stopped her cold. I had written about her specifically, asking Allah to guide her heart and heal whatever pain made her so angry. The realization that I had been praying for her while she mocked me sent a chill down her spine. She quickly folded the paper and slipped it back into the Qur'an, but the words had already burned themselves into her memory. That night, Madison lay in her king-sized bed staring at the ceiling. Her penthouse apartment felt emptier than usual, filled with designer furniture but lacking any real warmth. She couldn't stop thinking about my prayer, especially the part where I'd asked Allah to help Madison find peace. The irony wasn't lost on her that I was praying for the very person who ridiculed me. She picked up her phone and scrolled through Instagram, pausing at a photo from 3 years ago. There she was, standing outside a mosque with her friend Jessica, both of them wearing headscarves and smiling. Madison remembered that day clearly. Jessica had invited her to Friday prayers, and Madison had been genuinely curious about Islam. She'd felt something peaceful in that mosque, something she hadn't experienced in years. But when she'd posted the photo, her friend group had exploded with criticism. "You're not seriously considering converting, are you?" her best friend Chelsea had demanded. "It's so oppressive, Maddie, don't you want to be free?" The comments on her post ranged from confusion to outright hostility. Within hours, Madison had deleted the photo and never mentioned her interest in Islam again. Now, lying in the dark, Madison realized that her mockery of me might have been her way of convincing herself she'd made the right choice by walking away from what had called to her heart. The next morning, my phone rang while I was making breakfast. Uncle William's name appeared on the screen, and I hesitated before answering. He was the quietest family member, always observing but rarely speaking up during family drama. "Amelia," his gentle voice came through the phone, "I wanted to call and tell you how proud I am of the way you handled yourself last night." His words surprised me. Uncle William had never commented on my conversion to Islam or my choice to wear hijab. "Thank you, Uncle William," I replied softly, stirring honey into my tea. "I found your prayer in that book," he continued, his voice dropping to almost a whisper. "Madison showed it to me before she left. I hope you don't mind, but I read it. Those words, they touched something in my heart that's been sleeping for a long time." I nearly dropped my mug. "I'm glad it spoke to you." "I've been attending Friday prayers at the mosque downtown for the past 2 months, he confessed. "Started going after I saw how much peace your faith brought you, especially after your conversion. Yesterday, reading your dawah, I realized I want that same connection with God. I want that same strength you showed when you walked away with dignity instead of anger." The seed I'd unknowingly planted was already beginning to sprout in the most unexpected soil. Later that afternoon, the Wilson family group chat exploded with activity. Madison had posted several memes mocking religious Muslims, clearly trying to regain control of the narrative from the night before. The jokes were cruel and ignorant, targeting everything from prayer times to modest dress. I watched the messages roll in from my quiet apartment, feeling a familiar ache in my chest. Some family members responded with laughing emojis, while others remained suspiciously silent. The conversation spiraled into increasingly inappropriate territory as Madison's friends joined the chat. Then Aunt Margaret, my father's oldest sister, typed a message that stopped everyone cold, mocking someone's modesty, and "Faith says more about your character than theirs, Madison. Amelia showed more grace in 5 minutes of silence than you've shown in 25 years of talking." The chat went completely silent. Madison quickly tried to backtrack, claiming she was just joking around and that everyone was too sensitive these days. But Aunt Margaret's words hung in the digital air like smoke from a fire that couldn't be extinguished. 20 minutes later, Madison left the group chat entirely. The remaining family members began a much different conversation about respect, kindness, and the way we treat each other. My phone buzzed with private messages from cousins and aunts apologizing for their silence during dinner and expressing admiration for my composure. That evening, I sat at my laptop and opened Reddit. The story had been building inside me all day, and I needed to share it somewhere safe and anonymous. I created a throwaway account and began typing in the "R True Off My Chest" subreddit. My cousin mocked my hijab at family dinner. I didn't argue, I just left my Qur'an behind. The post poured out of me like water from a broken dam. I described the dinner, Madison's cruel comments, my silent exit, and the prayer she'd found. I wrote about the pain of being mocked by family, about choosing dignity over drama, and about how sometimes the most powerful response is no response at all. I hit post without expecting much. Within an hour, my inbox was flooded with responses. Comments ranged from Muslim women sharing similar experiences to non-Muslims expressing outrage at Madison's behavior. The post gained momentum throughout the night, climbing to the top of the subreddit. By morning, it had been shared across multiple platforms. Screenshots appeared on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. The story resonated with people who'd faced ridicule for their beliefs, their choices, or their appearance. It became a symbol of quiet strength in the face of public humiliation. Madison found the post 3 days later when a friend sent her the link, asking if she knew the family involved. The description was vague enough to maintain anonymity, but specific enough for Madison to recognize herself as the villain of the story. The viral post had an unexpected effect on Madison's social circle. While I had kept all names anonymous, Madison's friends began recognizing patterns in the story that matched their friends' behavior. Several people who knew about Friday night's dinner started connecting dots. Madison's Instagram followers began dropping slowly but steadily. Friends who had once encouraged her mean-spirited humor were now questioning their association with someone who would mock a family member's religious beliefs in public. The online comments supporting my decision to walk away with dignity stung Madison more than she'd expected. Her best friend Chelsea confronted her during their usual Saturday brunch. "Was that story about you?" Chelsea asked bluntly, sliding her phone across the table to show Madison the Reddit post. "Because if it was, I'm honestly disgusted." Madison's face burned with embarrassment. "It's not like that," she stammered. "You don't understand the context. Amelia's always been weird about religion stuff." "No, Madison," Chelsea interrupted. "What's weird is a grown woman mocking her cousin's clothes at a family dinner. What's weird is making fun of someone for being modest. I always thought you were just confident, but this is just cruel." 3 more friends distanced themselves from Madison over the following week. Her social media posts, once filled with hundreds of likes and supportive comments, now attracted mostly silence or subtle criticism. My anonymous Reddit account became a beacon for women facing similar struggles. Private messages flooded my inbox daily from sisters around the world sharing their own stories of mockery, family rejection, and the strength they found in modest dressing. "Your story gave me courage to wear hijab to work for the first time," wrote one message from a recent convert in Texas. "I was so scared of judgment, but seeing how you handled your cousin with such grace inspired me to stop hiding who I am." Another message came from a Jewish woman who wore a head covering. "Different faith, same struggles. Thank you for showing that silence can be the strongest response to ignorance." The most touching message came from a teenager whose own family had rejected her decision to dress modestly. "I've been feeling so alone. Your story reminded me that Allah sees my struggles even when no one else understands. I'm going to print out your post and keep it in my Qur'an like you kept your dawah." These messages filled my heart with a warmth I hadn't expected. What had started as a painful family dinner had become a source of strength for women worldwide. The ripple effect of that one quiet moment was reaching further than I could have imagined. I began responding to every message personally, offering encouragement and sharing verses from the Qur'an that had carried me through my own difficult times. Eid al-Fitr arrived 6 weeks after the infamous dinner. The Wilson family always gathered at Aunt Patricia's house for major holidays, but this year felt different before it even began. I received the usual invitation but decided to spend Eid quietly at home, attending morning prayers at the mosque and then enjoying a peaceful day of reflection. Madison arrived at the family gathering 2 hours late, dressed in a flowing maxi dress that covered her arms and legs completely. The change in her appearance didn't go unnoticed. Cousins whispered among themselves, wondering about Madison's sudden shift toward modesty. But the most noticeable absence was mine. Aunt Patricia had set a place for me out of habit, and the empty chair served as a silent reminder of what had happened at their last gathering. Uncle William mentioned that I was spending Eid in contemplation, and several family members expressed disappointment that they wouldn't see me. "It doesn't feel right without Amelia here," Cousin Nathan admitted. "She always brought such a peaceful energy to these gatherings." Madison sat quietly throughout most of the meal, her usual loud commentary replaced by thoughtful observation. When younger cousins asked about my absence, the adults struggled to explain without mentioning the incident that had driven me away. The celebration felt hollow without the very person whose faith they had mocked. 3 days after Eid, Madison sent me a voice message on WhatsApp. Her usually confident voice sounded hesitant and uncertain. "Hey Amelia," the message began with a long pause. "I just wanted to, I hope you had a good Eid. I know things have been weird since dinner and I hope you're doing okay, that's all." The message was clearly an attempt at reconciliation without actually apologizing. Madison couldn't bring herself to acknowledge her wrongdoing directly, but her discomfort was obvious in every hesitant word. I listened to the message 3 times, weighing my options. Part of me wanted to respond with warmth, to bridge the gap that had formed between us. Another part of me recognized that Madison wasn't ready for real accountability yet. In the end, I chose silence. Not out of anger or spite, but because sometimes silence speaks louder than words. Madison needed to sit with her discomfort and truly examine her actions before any meaningful healing could begin. My lack of response clearly unsettled Madison. She sent 2 more tentative messages over the following days, each one revealing her growing anxiety about our relationship. The silence I maintained wasn't meant to punish her, but to give her space to reflect on why she felt so desperate for my forgiveness without being willing to truly apologize. Something began shifting in Madison during the weeks following Eid. Family members noticed her posting less frequently on social media, and when she did post, the content was markedly different. Gone were the revealing outfits and party photos, replaced by nature scenes and inspirational quotes about kindness and understanding. Madison started following several Islamic pages on Instagram, though she tried to be subtle about it. She watched stories about modest fashion, listened to recitations of Quranic verses with English translations, and even saved posts about the meaning behind Islamic practices. Her friend Chelsea noticed the changes immediately. "You've been different lately," she commented during one of their coffee meetings. "More, thoughtful? And what's with all the long dresses? You used to make fun of girls who dressed like that." Madison shifted uncomfortably in her seat. "People change, Chelsea. Maybe I'm just growing up." "Growing up or copying your cousin?" Chelsea's question hit harder than Madison expected. The truth was that Madison couldn't stop thinking about the peace she'd witnessed in my demeanor, even in the face of public humiliation. She'd spent years equating confidence with loudness, strength with aggression, and freedom with exposure. But watching me walk away with quiet dignity had shaken her understanding of what real strength looked like. She began questioning everything she thought she knew about power, respect, and self-worth. Madison's transformation didn't go unnoticed by her college friend Bethany, who decided to address it directly during their monthly dinner date. Bethany had known Madison since freshman year and had watched her become increasingly bitter and critical over the years. "You used to be so much fun," Bethany said, cutting into her salmon, "but somewhere along the way you became really mean, Maddie, especially toward other women. What did Amelia ever do to you besides choose to dress differently?" Madison's fork froze halfway to her mouth. No one had ever called out her behavior so directly. "I mean, seriously," Bethany continued. "You used to light up rooms when you walked in. Now you just tear people down. It's like you're angry at the whole world, and I don't understand why." The honesty in Bethany's voice cracked something open in Madison's chest. For the first time, she tried to articulate the jealousy and insecurity that had driven her to attack me. "She just seemed so sure of herself," Madison admitted quietly. "Even when everyone was staring at her, even when people whispered about her conversion, she never doubted her choices. I envied that certainty." Bethany reached across the table and squeezed Madison's hand. "Then why not try to understand her faith instead of mocking it?" The question hung in the air between them like a challenge Madison wasn't sure she was ready to accept. That night, Madison had the most vivid dream of her life. She found herself back at Aunt Patricia's dinner table, but this time she was completely alone. The long mahogany table stretched endlessly in both directions, set with fine china but no food. The chandelier cast eerie shadows across empty chairs. In the dream, Madison called out for her family, but her voice echoed in the silence. She felt a crushing loneliness, the kind that comes from realizing you've pushed away everyone who ever mattered to you. Suddenly, I appeared in the doorway, but I looked different. My modest clothing seemed to glow with a soft, warm light, and my face radiated a peace that Madison had never seen before. I walked slowly toward the table, and with each step, the room became brighter and warmer. "I've been waiting for you to understand," I said in the dream, my voice gentle but filled with an otherworldly wisdom. "The light was always there, Madison. You just chose to look away." Madison woke up gasping, her heart pounding and tears streaming down her face. The dream felt more real than reality itself, and the image of my glowing figure remained burned in her memory long after consciousness returned. She spent the rest of the night sitting by her window, staring at the city lights and wondering if the peace I'd found could ever be hers too. 2 weeks later, Madison was driving home from work when she spotted a familiar figure walking along the sidewalk. I was heading toward the mosque for evening prayers, carrying grocery bags in both hands. My movements were unhurried and purposeful, and there was something about my posture that radiated contentment. Without fully understanding why, Madison pulled over and parked across the street. She watched from her car as I walked, noting how I nodded politely to strangers and helped an elderly man pick up papers that had blown from his hands. Everything about my demeanor spoke of inner peace. I wasn't rushing or stressed despite carrying heavy bags. I didn't check my phone or seem distracted by the world around me. I moved through life with an intentionality that Madison had never experienced. Madison followed at a distance as I entered the mosque grounds. She could hear the call to prayer echoing from the minaret, a sound she'd previously dismissed as foreign noise. But now, sitting in her car and watching people stream into the building for worship, she felt something stir in her chest. She sat there for an hour, watching as people of all ages and backgrounds entered the mosque. When I emerged after prayers, my face glowed with the same peaceful expression Madison had seen in her dream. The longing in Madison's heart grew stronger with each passing day. The following Saturday morning, Madison sat in her usual coffee shop reviewing some work documents when she accidentally knocked her wallet off the table. Credit cards and bills scattered across the floor, and Madison scrambled to collect them before other customers stepped on her important papers. A woman in a beautiful emerald hijab immediately knelt down to help, gathering Madison's cards with gentle efficiency. "Here you go, sister," the woman said with a warm smile, handing over the wallet. "Happens to the best of us." Something about the woman's kindness reminded Madison instantly of me. The same gentle manner, the same genuine concern for others, the same use of sister as a term of endearment rather than mere politeness. "Thank you so much," Madison stammered, struck by the woman's beauty and grace. "Of course," the woman replied. "We're all just trying to help each other through this life, right?" After the woman left, Madison sat staring at her recovered wallet, thinking about the interaction. There had been no judgment in the woman's eyes, no attempt to get anything in return for her help, just pure, uncomplicated kindness. Madison realized that every Muslim woman she'd actually interacted with had shown her the same type of genuine care and respect. The stereotypes she'd believed had never matched her real-world experiences. The disconnect between her prejudices and reality began to crumble. 1 month after the dinner incident, a package arrived at Madison's apartment with no return address. Inside, wrapped carefully in tissue paper, was my small leather-bound Qur'an. A yellow sticky note was attached to the cover. Madison's handwriting filled the small space. I read it. "I still don't know how to feel, but thank you for leaving it behind." Madison had spent weeks working up the courage to return the book. She'd read it cover to cover, using online resources to understand the Arabic verses and their English translations. Some passages had moved her to tears, others had challenged her thinking, and a few had felt like they were speaking directly to her heart. The sticky note had taken her an hour to write. She'd drafted and redrafted the message, trying to capture her complicated feelings without committing to anything specific. The admission that she'd read the entire Qur'an was itself a significant confession for someone who had publicly mocked Islamic practices. Madison had also made copies of my handwritten dua before returning the book. She kept the copies in her own journal, reading them whenever she felt angry or lost. The words I'd written asking Allah to heal Madison's pain had become a source of comfort she never expected to find. The return of the Qur'an marked a turning point in both our journeys, though neither of us fully understood it yet. When I opened my returned Qur'an and found Madison's note, I sat quietly for several minutes, processing the significance of her words. The fact that she had read the entire book represented hours of engagement with my faith, far more than a simple apology would have conveyed. I opened to the page where my original dua had been tucked and found the paper exactly where I'd left it. But now I felt called to write a new prayer, one that reflected my evolving understanding of the situation. Taking out my favorite blue pen, I wrote on a fresh piece of paper, "Ya Allah," Madison read your words. She held your book in her hands and let your guidance touch her heart. Now I ask you to continue softening her soul and opening her mind to the truth she's seeking. Let her find you the way you found me, in the quiet moments when the world's noise fades away. Guide her to the peace she's searching for. I dated the prayer and tucked it into the same spot where my original dua had been. Somehow I knew this wouldn't be the last time the Qur'an would pass between Madison and me. The act of writing that prayer filled me with hope. I could sense Allah working in Madison's heart. even if she couldn't fully recognize it herself yet. 2 days later, my phone rang with Madison's number. I answered hesitantly, unsure what to expect. "Amelia?" Madison's voice was softer than I'd ever heard it. Could we maybe have tea together? I know things have been weird, and I don't really know how to. I just think we should talk." The vulnerability in her voice surprised me. This wasn't the confident, sometimes cruel Madison I'd known for years. This was someone genuinely struggling with something deeper than family drama. "I'd like that," I replied simply. We met at a quiet cafe downtown, away from family and friends who might judge or interrupt. Madison arrived first and had already ordered tea for both of us. She wore a long-sleeved blouse and midi skirt, her usual bold jewelry replaced by simple pieces. The conversation started awkwardly, with Madison struggling to find words for feelings she'd never had to articulate before. But gradually, the truth began to emerge. "I've been thinking about what you wrote in that prayer," Madison admitted, stirring honey into her tea, "about me hurting. I didn't realize how obvious it was to everyone else." I listened without judgment, creating space for Madison to explore her own emotions at her own pace. "I think I've been angry for a long time," she continued, "and taking it out on people who didn't deserve it." Madison's confession opened floodgates she'd kept closed for years. She told me about her secret visit to the mosque 3 years earlier, about the peace she'd felt there, and about how her friend's mockery had driven her away from exploring Islam further. "I was so curious," Madison admitted, her voice breaking slightly. "But when Chelsea and the others made fun of me for even being interested, I felt like I had to choose between my faith journey and my social life. I chose wrong." She described how she'd spent years trying to convince herself that she'd made the right decision by embracing a lifestyle that felt increasingly empty. The parties, the attention-seeking outfits, the cruel humor, none of it had brought her the satisfaction she'd expected. "Watching you that night at dinner," Madison continued, "seeing how calm you stayed when I was being horrible, I realized you had something I'd been searching for my whole life. Inner peace, certainty, connection to something bigger than yourself." I reached across the table and squeezed her hand. "It's never too late to find your way back to what calls to your heart." Madison's eyes filled with tears. "I don't even know where to start. I've been running away from faith for so long, I don't remember how to run toward it." "Start with curiosity," I suggested gently. "Come with me to the women's study group at the mosque next Friday. Just listen. See if anything resonates." The following Friday evening, Madison and I walked into the mosque together for the women's halakha. Madison had borrowed a scarf from me, and I could see her hands trembling slightly as she adjusted it around her head. The study group met in a comfortable room with cushions arranged in a circle. About 15 women of various ages sat together, their faces warm and welcoming. Sister Fatima, who led the group, smiled broadly when she saw Madison. "Welcome, sister," Fatima said, using the same term of endearment that had touched Madison at the coffee shop. "We're so glad you've joined us tonight." The evening's discussion focused on a verse from the Qur'an about patience and perseverance in the face of difficulty. As different women shared their interpretations and personal experiences, Madison listened with intense concentration. When Sister Fatima read the verse in Arabic, and then its English translation, Madison's eyes widened with recognition. It was one of the passages that had moved her most deeply when she'd read my Qur'an. During the discussion, an older woman named Sister Aisha spoke about finding Islam later in life after years of feeling spiritually lost. "I thought I was too old, too set in my ways," Sister Aisha shared, "but Allah guided me to this community when I needed it most." Age is never a barrier to truth. Madison's heart softened with each story, and I could see her walls continuing to crumble. The next family dinner happened 6 weeks later at Uncle Thomas's house. Madison arrived wearing a flowing dress that covered her arms and legs, her hair pulled back in a modest style. She carried herself differently now, less aggressive, more thoughtful. I sat beside her at the dinner table, and for the first time in months, the family atmosphere felt genuinely peaceful. Madison participated in conversations without dominating them, asked thoughtful questions about other people's lives, and even helped serve dessert without being asked. When cousin Nathan mentioned his job struggles, Madison offered genuine encouragement instead of her usual dismissive advice. When Aunt Sandra talked about her health concerns, Madison listened with real compassion. The change in Madison's demeanor was so dramatic that several family members commented privately about her transformation. Uncle William winked at me across the table, recognizing the spiritual journey that was unfolding. No one mentioned the incident from months earlier, but its lessons hung in the air like incense. Madison had learned the difference between confidence and cruelty, between strength and aggression, between being heard and being respected. As we helped clear the table together, Madison whispered, "Thank you for not giving up on me." I smiled back. "Thank you for not giving up on yourself." Later that evening, I received a text message from my teenage cousin Emma, who had witnessed both the original dinner incident and Madison's transformation over the subsequent months. "Amelia," the message read, "I've been watching how you handled everything with Madison, and I'm really inspired. You never fought back or tried to hurt her, even when she was cruel to you. You just stayed graceful and let your actions speak. I want to learn how to be like that too." Emma's message reminded me that our family drama had become a teaching moment for the younger generation. They had watched an adult conflict play out and seen how dignity could triumph over aggression, how patience could overcome cruelty. I thought about the ripple effects of that one difficult evening. Madison had found her way back to faith. Uncle William had begun his own spiritual journey. I had connected with sisters worldwide through my story, and now Emma was learning lessons about grace under pressure. What had started as a painful moment of family cruelty had blossomed into multiple stories of growth, forgiveness, and spiritual awakening. The chain of kindness continued to spread in ways I never could have imagined when I first walked away from that dinner table, leaving only my Qur'an behind. 6 months after the dinner that changed everything, I sat in my quiet apartment reflecting on the journey. The small leather-bound Qur'an sat on my coffee table, its pages now filled with additional prayers and bookmarks from both Madison and me. Madison had recently begun attending the women's study group regularly and was considering taking Shahada. Her transformation from my biggest critic to my closest spiritual companion had surprised everyone, including us. The viral Reddit post had long since faded from public attention, but the women who had messaged me continued to share updates about their own journeys toward confidence and faith. Some had started wearing hijab, others had simply learned to stand up for themselves with dignity. Uncle William had officially converted to Islam 2 months ago, citing my example of patient faith as his inspiration. The family had attended his Shahada ceremony with love and support, their understanding of Islam transformed by witnessing its effects on their loved ones. A gentle knock at my door interrupted my reflections. Madison stood outside with 2 cups of tea and a shy smile. "I brought your favorite," she said, settling beside me on the couch. "I wanted to thank you again for leaving your Qur'an that night." I smiled, thinking of how Allah works in mysterious ways. "It wasn't really mine to keep," I replied. "Some things are meant to be shared." What I had left behind that night wasn't just a book. It was a seed of change that had bloomed in the most unexpected hearts, proving that sometimes the most powerful dawah is simply living your faith with quiet dignity.